They used to say I was born to fix broken things, but no one ever imagined I'd end up fixing the stars. My name is Ethan Cole. I grew up in a small, dusty town in Texas, where the nights were darker than the days. We didn't have much. Not money, not comfort, not even steady power. Sometimes the lights would go out for hours and all we could see was the sky full of stars. While other kids played with toys, I played with broken wires. My father was a mechanic, his hands always stained with grease and dreams that never came true. He used to say, "Son, machines talk to those who listen." I listened. Maybe too well. Our house was small. 2 rooms, 1 thin wall, and a roof that coughed dust when it rained. My mother spent most of her days in bed, coughing too. Her medicine cost more than my father made in a week. I remember watching him at night, sitting by her side, whispering, "We'll make it somehow," even when we both knew he didn't believe it. I was 10 when I first looked at the stars and made myself a promise. One day, I would touch them, not with dreams, with my own hands. I didn't know what NASA was back then. I didn't know what satellites or galaxies were. All I knew was that when I stared into that endless sky, it felt like something was calling me. Something far beyond this town, beyond poverty, beyond the sound of the power lines that buzzed and died every evening. Every broken thing in our house became my classroom. Old radios, rusty fans, burnt-out bulbs. I opened them all. I'd sit on the floor, surrounded by wires and screws, pretending I could understand their language. My father would shake his head and laugh, "Ethan, you'll break more than you fix." He didn't know that breaking things was how I learned. One night the power went out again. I remember holding a candle close to the ceiling, watching the wax drip onto my hands. Outside, the sky was full of stars, brighter than ever. I whispered, "I'll fix you someday, all of you." It sounded crazy even to me. At school, I wasn't much. My grades were average, my clothes secondhand. Kids teased me for smelling like engine oil. I didn't mind. I used to draw rocket ships on the back of my math tests, dreaming of something bigger. Teachers would say, "Ethan, you need to focus on reality." But what they didn't know, dreaming was my reality. When I turned 12, my father lost his job at the repair shop. The factory closed down and the whole town went quiet. Bills piled up, nights got colder. We sold the television, then the fridge, and finally the truck. My mother cried the night we gave it away. That truck was the heart of our family, the thing that carried us through storms. After that, my father started drinking. Not much, at first, just to forget. But forgetting became his only way of remembering. I still see him sitting by the window, bottle in hand, staring at the stars that I wanted so badly to reach. When I asked him once, "Dad, do you think we'll ever have a better life?" He didn't answer. He just sighed. "Some of us fix cars, Ethan. Some of us dream too big." And then he laughed. Not the happy kind, the kind that hurts. But I didn't stop dreaming. At night, when they slept, I'd sneak into the shed behind our house. There, with a flashlight and old junk, I built my first invention, a radio that didn't need electricity. It ran on a hand crank from an old bicycle. It barely worked, but the day it caught a signal, a faint voice from somewhere far away, I cried. It was proof that the world was bigger than this town. My mother saw me crying and smiled weakly. She said, "Someday, those hands will build something that matters." And I believed her. That summer, I started collecting thrown-away electronics from the junkyard. People thought I was crazy, a kid digging through garbage, but every piece of trash was a puzzle, and I loved puzzles. By 14, I had my first small workbench, a few tools, a cracked magnifying glass, and a dream that refused to die. I'd fix radios for neighbors, sometimes just for food. They called me the wire boy. I liked it, because even if the world didn't see me, the wires did. But just when I thought life couldn't get any harder, it did. One night, my mother didn't wake up. The air smelled like rain again, the same way it did when my world fell apart. My father didn't say a word. He just held her hand until the morning. After the funeral, everything changed. He stopped talking, stopped working, stopped believing. And I started running. Running from silence, from sadness, from the kind of emptiness that eats you alive. But the stars were still there, shining like nothing had happened. I hated them for that. I hated how they kept shining when my world had gone dark. But deep inside, I knew one day I'd reach them. Not to escape my pain, but to make sense of it. Because maybe the only way to fix a broken life is to learn how to fix the universe itself. After my mother's death, silence became my only companion. It was the kind of silence that hums in your ears, that follows you even in your dreams. My father stopped fixing cars. He stopped fixing anything. He just sat on the porch every evening, staring at the horizon, a cigarette between his fingers and pain behind his eyes. Sometimes he would call my name and then forget why he did. The house started falling apart, like it couldn't survive without her warmth. The roof leaked, the power flickered, and the nights felt colder than before. I tried to keep everything running, tightening bolts, patching wires, pretending I could hold it all together. But I was just 15, a boy trying to repair a world that didn't want to be fixed. I dropped out of school the same year. There wasn't money for books, and someone had to pay the bills. So I went to work at a local scrapyard, $10 a day, cutting metal and sorting junk. The noise, the smoke, the burn of the iron, it became my new classroom. But every time I looked up at the night sky, I still felt that same ache. The stars seemed farther now, as if they were moving away from me. At the scrapyard, I met an old man named Jack. He was a retired radio technician, gruff but kind. He caught me one day fixing a broken transistor radio during lunch break. "You've got good hands, kid, but you're looking down too much. The real signals are up there." He pointed to the sky, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Jack started teaching me about circuits, waves, and frequencies. We worked late sometimes, using the scrapyard's leftover parts to build small transmitters. He'd tell me stories about the Apollo missions, about the men who looked at the same stars I did and actually went there. I listened like a starving man hearing about food. But life, as always, didn't like to stay kind for long. One morning, I came to work and found Jack's bench empty. They said he had a stroke in his sleep. He was gone, just like that. Another silence, another goodbye. That night, I sat behind the scrapyard with the transmitter we'd built together. It didn't work right. The signal kept cutting. I twisted the dial again and again until I finally caught a faint voice, a broadcast, maybe hundreds of miles away, saying, "Space is not for the chosen, it's for the curious." The words hit me like lightning. I realized I didn't need anyone's permission to learn. If the world wouldn't teach me, I'd teach myself. So I bought secondhand books with my wages. Old science textbooks, physics manuals, whatever I could find at flea markets. I studied by candlelight, tracing diagrams with my finger, memorizing formulas I barely understood. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with my face pressed against the pages, ink smudged across my cheek. Years passed like that. Days working, nights dreaming. I built things, broke them, rebuilt them again. Every failure taught me something new. Every spark, every burn mark on my hands was a lesson written in pain. By 19, I built a small telescope from discarded lenses and pipes. It was ugly, crooked, But it worked. The first time I looked through it and saw the craters on the moon, I forgot to breathe. It wasn't just rock and light, it was proof that distance didn't mean impossible. Then one night, my father came into the shed, drunk, angry. He saw the telescope, the books, the wires. He shouted, "You think this will fix your life? You think the stars care about you?" Before I could answer, he threw the telescope to the ground. It shattered. I just stood there, tears hot in my eyes, pieces of glass shining like constellations on the floor. That was the night I left home. I packed my notebook, a screwdriver, and Jack's old transmitter. I walked until the road disappeared into the horizon. No map, no plan, just a boy who had lost everything but his stubborn hope. I slept under the open sky, and for the first time I didn't feel afraid. Because even in the dark, the stars were still there, waiting. The first night on the road was colder than I imagined. I slept under a broken billboard that said, "Dream big." I laughed at the irony, a homeless boy sleeping beneath a dream. I found a job in a repair shop in another town. The owner, Mr. Peters, was a kind man with sharp eyes and a slower heart. He let me fix broken radios and televisions, paid me in cash, and gave me a corner to sleep in behind the shop. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. At night, after closing, I worked on something of my own. A small project, a radio receiver that could pick up faint signals from space. I didn't have the right tools, but I had stubbornness, and sometimes that's enough. I scavenged old wires, reused metal plates, and soldered circuits on a broken table. For weeks, I failed. Every night I turned the dial, all I got was static, a soft, endless whisper of nothingness. But I kept trying, because even failure has a rhythm, and I was learning its music. One night it happened. A faint beep, rhythmic and steady, a signal. It wasn't a voice, but it was something. I wrote down the pattern, drew the waveform, and realized it was a transmission, a satellite signal. I had captured a piece of the universe with my bare hands. I ran outside, shouting, laughing, crying all at once. The sky above me was endless, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt connected. That discovery became my new obsession. I wanted to build something that could send a signal back, my own message to the stars. I spent months designing, sketching, testing. My fingers bled from solder burns. My eyes stung from lack of sleep. But the dream was alive. When I turned 23, I found out NASA was running a program for young innovators, accepting open submissions for experimental satellite designs. It felt impossible. I had no degree, no credentials, no mentor, just an idea and a notebook full of scribbles, but I submitted it anyway. It cost me my week's salary just to print and ship the application. Weeks passed. No reply. Then one morning, a thin envelope arrived. It wasn't heavy enough to be good news. Dear Mr. Cole, thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, we cannot accept your proposal at this time. I read it again and again, each word cutting deeper. It wasn't just rejection. It was the sound of the world telling me I didn't belong. I folded the letter neatly and put it in my pocket. I didn't tear it. I wanted to remember how it felt to fail. That night, I went back to the shed and stared at my broken equipment. I wanted to quit. For the first time, I seriously thought, maybe Dad was right. Maybe the stars weren't meant for people like me. Then I saw Jack's old transmitter sitting on the shelf. A layer of dust covered it, but the dial still gleamed. I turned it on. Static filled the room. Then a faint voice came through.
a weather report from miles away, calm and steady. Something about it reminded me of my mother's voice, gentle and certain. And in that moment, I remembered what she'd said. Someday, those hands will build something that matters. I picked up my notebook again. Over the next year, I rebuilt my project from scratch. Every mistake became a blueprint for the next version. I studied free online courses at the library, read NASA archives, learned about propulsion and communication systems. The librarian knew me by name. Sometimes she'd bring me coffee and say, "Still chasing the stars, Ethan?" And I'd smile. Always. By the time I was 26, I had something real, a working prototype of a microsatellite transmitter, small enough to fit in a shoebox. I called it the Whisper, because it was built to send a quiet message, proof that even the smallest voice could reach the sky. I filmed a short video explaining the design, the math, and the idea behind it. I uploaded it to a small online forum for space engineers. I didn't expect much. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a man named Dr. Lewis from NASA's research division. He wrote, "I saw your project. I think you might be onto something. Can we talk?" My hands shook so much I could barely type back. When I hit send, I just sat there in silence. The same silence that once haunted me now felt like peace. It wasn't success yet, but it was a doorway. And for the first time, I felt ready to walk through it.
The day I entered NASA's gate, I felt like I was walking into a dream I wasn't supposed to have. White buildings, sharp sunlight, and people who looked like they were born knowing everything. And there I was, a kid from a scrapyard, wearing a second-hand shirt and carrying a broken transmitter in my backpack. Dr. Lewis met me in the lobby. He shook my hand and said, "You built this alone?" I nodded. He smiled, not a polite smile, but one that said, "I understand what it took to get here." They gave me a small workspace, just a desk and a computer. For weeks, I worked with a team of engineers, improving the Whisper. Every detail mattered: the signal strength, the power source, the thermal resistance. I was learning more in a day than I had in years. One evening, when everyone left, I stayed behind. I turned on the prototype and listened. That same soft static sound, the one that once felt like loneliness, now sounded like possibility. Months passed. The final test was near. If it worked, the Whisper would become part of a real mission. If it failed, it would be forgotten. I didn't sleep that night. I sat outside the lab, staring at the stars, whispering a quiet prayer, not for success, but for peace. I thought about Mom, about Jack, about my father's silence. Every scar, every burn mark, every rejection, they had all led me here. The next morning, the test began. The countdown echoed through the control room. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the monitor blinked. A faint signal appeared on the screen. The room filled with cheers, but I didn't move. I just stared, tears falling quietly. That small signal, that whisper, was mine. It had finally reached the sky. Days later, they announced it officially. NASA would include the Whisper transmitter in their upcoming satellite launch. My name was listed on the credits. Ethan Cole, from nowhere to the stars. The night before the launch, I went back to my old town. The scrapyard was gone, replaced by a supermarket. The billboard that once said "Dream Big" was faded but still standing. I stood under it again, just like years ago. Only this time, I wasn't laughing. When the rocket launched, I watched it on a small screen. It rose through the clouds, fire and smoke trailing behind. And for the first time in my life, I felt weightless. Weeks later, the signal came back, clear, strong, alive. My transmitter whispering from space. Reporters called, people wanted interviews, universities offered scholarships, but none of that mattered because I wasn't chasing fame, I was chasing connection, and I had found it. One evening, I visited my father's grave. I placed the first model of the whisper beside his name. "I made it, Dad," I said softly. "The stars did care." I looked up and the sky seemed to shimmer, as if it was listening. Years passed. I became part of NASA's communication team, designing systems to help future explorers talk to Earth. Every mission reminded me of the boy who refused to quit. Sometimes I speak at schools. I tell the kids, you don't need to be born into greatness. You just need to believe that your voice matters, even if it starts as a whisper. And when I stand under the night sky now, I still hear that faint static in my mind. The sound that once felt like loneliness now means home. Because somewhere out there, floating in the silence of space, a small signal still whispers back, and it says, "I'm still here."